Hello, my name is Dorothy. I'm 70 years old, and today I'm going to share with you the most shocking story of betrayal I've ever experienced. It's about my daughter-in-law, Jessica, and how she almost succeeded in destroying my life while pretending to care about my well-being. This story begins 5 years ago, when my son Michael, 45 years old and recently divorced, came home with stars in his eyes, talking about a woman he had met at work. Jessica, he said her name with such tenderness that my heart filled with hope. After his painful divorce and 2 years of loneliness, seeing my son happy again was all I wanted. The first time I met Jessica, I was immediately impressed. She was 38 years old, impeccably dressed, with perfect manners and a smile that could light up any room. She brought me flowers, complimented my cooking, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me better. "Dorothy," she said that first Sunday lunch, "Michael has told me so much about you. He says you're the strongest, most intelligent woman he knows. I can see where he gets his good heart from." I felt an immediate warmth toward her. After years of dealing with Michael's ex-wife, who barely tolerated my presence, having a daughter-in-law who seemed to appreciate me was like a gift from heaven. Jessica was everything Michael's first wife wasn't. She was attentive, affectionate, and seemed to understand the importance of family. She would call me during the week just to check how I was doing, remembered my doctor appointments, and even offered to take me shopping when Michael was traveling for work. Within 6 months, they were engaged. I was thrilled. Finally, my son had found someone who not only loved him, but also respected his family. Jessica even insisted that the wedding be small and intimate, saying she wanted it to be about family, not a big spectacle. The wedding was beautiful. Jessica looked radiant, and Michael couldn't stop smiling. During her speech, she looked directly at me and said, "Dorothy, thank you for raising the most wonderful man I've ever known. I promise I'll take good care of him, and I hope you'll always be part of our family." I cried tears of joy that day. I thought I had finally gained the daughter I never had. For the first year of marriage, everything seemed perfect. Jessica and Michael bought a house just 20 minutes away from mine. She would invite me for dinner twice a week, and we would spend hours talking about recipes to life stories. She seemed genuinely interested in learning about our family history, asking about photos, wanting to know about Michael's childhood. I started to see Jessica as more than just my son's wife. She was becoming my friend, my companion. When I had a minor surgery to remove a cyst, Jessica was the one who took me to the hospital and stayed with me all day. When I was feeling lonely on weekends, she would show up with movies and popcorn, saying she wanted to spend time with her favorite mother-in-law. But looking back now, I realized there were small signs I chose to ignore. Little comments that seemed innocent at the time, but were actually planting seeds of doubt about my capabilities. "Dorothy," she would say with a concerned smile, "are you sure you're okay driving at night? I heard that vision gets worse with age." Or, "I noticed you forgot to take your blood pressure medication yesterday. Are you having trouble remembering things?" I thought she was just being caring. I had no idea she was building a case against me. The first real warning sign came during our second Christmas together. I had been hosting Christmas dinner for the family for over 30 years. It was our tradition. But that year, Jessica suggested we have it at their house instead. "Dorothy," she said sweetly, "you've done so much for this family over the years. Let us take care of Christmas this year. You just relax and enjoy being a guest for once." It sounded reasonable, even thoughtful. But when Christmas Day came, I felt like an outsider in what should have been a family celebration. Jessica had changed all our traditions, served different food, And when I tried to help in the kitchen, she gently but firmly told me to go sit down and rest. "You've earned the right to be waited on," she said with that perfect smile. But something in her eyes made me feel like I was being dismissed rather than honored. That night, driving home alone to my empty house, I felt a strange sadness I couldn't quite identify. It was the first Christmas in decades that I didn't feel needed by my own family. But I told myself I was being silly, maybe even a little jealous. Jessica was just trying to be a good hostess. I should be grateful that my son had found such a caring wife. How wrong I was. Because what I didn't know was that Jessica had been systematically planning something that would change my life forever. Something that would test everything I thought I knew about family, love, and survival. The real Jessica was about to reveal herself, and when she did, I would discover that sometimes the people who smile the brightest are hiding the darkest intentions. The first crack in Jessica's perfect facade appeared on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 18 months after the wedding. I remember the date because it was the day my entire world started to crumble. I had called Michael to ask if he could help me move some furniture in my guest room. Nothing major, just rearranging things so I could set up a small craft area. I'd been wanting to get back into quilting, something that had always brought me peace. "Mom," Michael said, his voice sounding strained, "I can't come over today. Jessica thinks it would be better if you hired someone to help with heavy lifting. She's worried about my back." This was strange. Michael had always been eager to help me, and he'd never had back problems. But I didn't want to cause any marital tension, so I agreed to hire someone. Later that afternoon, Jessica called me. Her voice was different somehow, less warm than usual. "Dorothy, I hope you understand why I didn't want Michael lifting heavy furniture. He's been so stressed at work lately, and I'm trying to protect his health. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions for the people we love, even when they don't understand." There was something in the way she said it that made my skin crawl. It was as if she was speaking to a child who couldn't understand adult decisions. But I pushed the feeling aside and thanked her for caring about Michael's well-being. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more changes. Michael's weekly phone calls became less frequent. When I invited them for Sunday dinner, Jessica would often decline, saying Michael needed to rest or they had other commitments. When I did see them, Jessica seemed to answer for Michael more often, speaking over him or finishing his sentences. The most unsettling change was in how Jessica spoke to me. The warm, affectionate tone was gradually being replaced by something that sounded almost condescending. She would speak slower, as if I might not understand, and often repeated things I had clearly heard the first time. "Dorothy," she said one day when I mentioned wanting to plant some new flowers in my garden, "are you sure that's a good idea? Gardening can be very physically demanding for someone your age. Maybe you should consider something less strenuous, like reading or watching television." Someone my age? I was 70, not 90, and I had been gardening my entire adult life. But Jessica said it with such apparent concern that questioning her made me feel ungrateful. The turning point came during a family barbecue at their house in early summer. I was telling a story about Michael's childhood, something funny that had happened when he was 8 years old. Halfway through the story, Jessica interrupted me. "Dorothy, you told us that story last week, remember? And the week before that." She turned to the other guests with an apologetic smile. "Sometimes older people repeat themselves without realizing it. It's completely normal." The room fell silent. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. The worst part was that I wasn't entirely sure if I had told the story before or not. Jessica's confidence made me doubt my own memory. Michael looked uncomfortable but didn't defend me. That silence hurt more than Jessica's words. That night, I went home and started a journal. I decided to write down everything I did, everyone I talked to, every story I told. If my memory was failing, I wanted to track it. If it wasn't, I wanted proof. What I discovered over the next few weeks was alarming, but not in the way I expected. My memory was fine. In fact, when I reviewed my journal entries, I realized I had never repeated that story to Jessica and Michael. I had told it to my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, but never to them. Jessica had lied. But why? The answer came during a phone conversation I accidentally overheard. I had arrived at their house early for dinner and was letting myself in through the back door, as I had been doing for months, when I heard Jessica talking on the phone in the kitchen. "I know it seems mean," she was saying, "but you don't understand how difficult this situation is. She's getting worse every month. Last week, she tried to tell us the same story 3 times in one evening. Michael is starting to see it too, but he's in denial because she's his mother." I froze in the doorway, hidden by the wall. I'm documenting everything. The memory issues, the confusion, the way she's becoming increasingly dependent on us. Michael works so hard, and having to constantly worry about his mother is affecting his health and our marriage. Something has to be done soon. My blood ran cold. Jessica was talking about me like I was a burden, a problem to be solved. And she was lying about my mental state to whoever was on the other end of that call. I quietly backed out of the house and sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to process what I had heard. When I finally went back inside, Jessica greeted me with her usual bright smile. "Dorothy, you're early. I was just talking to my sister about planning a surprise party for Michael's birthday. You won't say anything, will you?" The ease with which she lied was terrifying. I smiled back and promised to keep the secret, but inside, I was screaming. That night, I upgraded my journal keeping to something more systematic. I started recording not just what I did, but what Jessica said about what I did. I began paying closer attention to her comments, her suggestions, her seemingly innocent observations about my capabilities. What I discovered was a pattern of deliberate manipulation that was so subtle, so carefully crafted, that I almost admired its sophistication, even as it horrified me. Jessica wasn't just lying about my mental state. She was systematically working to make everyone around us believe that I was declining, that I was becoming a burden, that difficult decisions would soon need to be made about my care. But I still had no idea how far she was willing to take this cruel charade. I thought I had seen the worst of Jessica's deception. I was wrong. The real horror was still to come, and when it arrived, it would threaten not just my independence, but everything I had worked for my entire life. 3 months after discovering Jessica's phone conversation, I thought I had seen the extent of her deception. I was keeping detailed records, being extra careful about everything I said and did, and trying to protect myself from her manipulation. But I underestimated how calculated and patient she could be. The next phase of Jessica's plan began with what seemed like acts of kindness. "Dorothy," she said one morning when she called, "I've been thinking about how hard it must be for you to manage that big house all by yourself. What if Michael and I started helping with some of the maintenance? We could take over paying your utility bills, maybe handle some of the yard work. It sounded generous, but alarm bells went off in my head. I had been managing my house just fine for the 15 years since my husband died. My finances were stable, and I took pride in my independence. Thank you for the offer, Jessica, but I'm managing everything just fine. But Dorothy, she persisted, you shouldn't have to worry about these things at your age. Let us take care of you. That's what family is for. That phrase, at your age, was becoming her favorite weapon. Every suggestion, every offer of help came with that same condescending reminder that I was somehow too old to manage my own life. When I continued to politely decline her help, Jessica's tactics became more aggressive. She started involving Michael more directly. Michael called me a few days later, sounding frustrated. "Mom, Jessica told me you refused to let us help with the house maintenance. She's just trying to make things easier for you. Why are you being so stubborn?" I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. Jessica was turning my own son against me, making my desire for independence look like irrational stubbornness. But the most insidious part of her plan was how she started manufacturing evidence of my supposed decline. She would invite me to dinner, then deliberately give me wrong information about the time or date, then act concerned when I showed up at the wrong time. "Oh, Dorothy," she would say with exaggerated worry, "we talked about this yesterday. Dinner is at 6, not 7. Are you feeling all right? You seem confused." She did this with appointments, with plans, with conversations. She would tell me one thing, then later claim she had said something completely different, always in front of Michael or other family members. The worst incident happened during a family gathering for Michael's birthday. Jessica had told me it was a casual barbecue and to come at 3 o'clock. When I arrived in jeans and a casual shirt, I found everyone dressed up for what was clearly an elegant dinner party that had started at 2. "Oh no, Dorothy," Jessica said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I told you it was formal attire and starts at 2. Don't you remember our conversation yesterday?" I felt humiliated and confused. Had I misunderstood? But when I checked my journal that evening, I had written down exactly what she told me. Casual clothes, 3 o'clock. Jessica was gaslighting me, systematically making me doubt my own perceptions and memories while building a case that I was losing my mental faculties. The manipulation escalated when she started involving medical professionals. She convinced Michael that I needed to see a doctor about my memory issues. "Mom," Michael said during one of our increasingly rare phone calls, "Jessica thinks it would be a good idea for you to get a cognitive assessment, just to be safe. There's no shame in it, and if there are any early signs of dementia, it's better to catch them early." I was trapped. If I refused, it would look like I was in denial about obvious problems. If I agreed, I would be validating Jessica's lies about my mental state. I decided to agree, but I was prepared. I had my journals, I had been doing mental exercises to keep my mind sharp, and I was confident that any objective assessment would prove my cognitive abilities were intact. The appointment was with Dr. Harrison, a geriatric specialist that Jessica had recommended. She insisted on driving me to the appointment, saying Michael was too busy at work. During the drive, Jessica kept making comments designed to increase my anxiety. "Dorothy, please don't be embarrassed if you can't remember some of the things the doctor asks. Memory loss is completely natural at your age. The important thing is that we get you the help you need." By the time we reached the doctor's office, I was so anxious that I was second-guessing everything I thought I knew about myself. Dr. Harrison was professional, but seemed to have already formed opinions about my condition before he examined me. His questions felt leading, designed to reveal problems rather than assess my actual capabilities. "Mrs. Dorothy," he said, "your daughter-in-law has expressed some concerns about your memory and decision-making abilities. Can you tell me what year it is? Who is the current president?" I answered correctly, but he seemed more interested in Jessica's observations than my responses. "She's mentioned that you've been repeating stories, having trouble with appointments, and showing some confusion about daily activities. How do you feel about these concerns?" I tried to explain that Jessica's accounts weren't accurate, that I kept detailed records that proved my memory was fine, but Dr. Harrison seemed to interpret my defense as evidence of the denial that often accompanies cognitive decline. The most devastating part came when Jessica spoke privately with the doctor. I could see them through the window of his office, and Jessica was animated, clearly providing detailed examples of my supposed problems. She had a folder with her, which I assumed contained documentation of incidents I didn't even remember happening. When Dr. Harrison returned, his demeanor had changed completely. "Mrs. Dorothy," he said gently, "based on what I've observed today and the detailed information your family has provided, I believe you're experiencing some early cognitive changes that could benefit from closer monitoring and support." I felt the world spinning around me. Jessica had succeeded. A medical professional was now validating her lies about my mental state. But Dr. Harrison wasn't finished. "I'm going to recommend that your family consider some additional support systems for you, perhaps someone to help manage your medications, assist with household tasks, and ensure your safety. There are excellent facilities that specialize in caring for people in your situation." Facilities? He was talking about nursing homes. Jessica reached over and squeezed my hand with fake sympathy. "Don't worry, Dorothy. Michael and I will make sure you get the best possible care. That's what family is for." As we drove home, Jessica was quiet, but I could feel her satisfaction radiating from the driver's seat. She had accomplished something significant that day, and we both knew it. That evening, alone in my house, I sat with my journals spread out on the kitchen table. I had documented everything, but it didn't matter. Jessica had created a convincing narrative about my decline, and she had the medical backing to support it. But I wasn't ready to give up. I had one advantage that Jessica didn't know about. I had started recording our conversations, and what I was about to discover would reveal the true extent of Jessica's deception and give me the ammunition I needed to fight back. The war for my independence was about to begin, and I was going to show Jessica that this 70-year-old woman wasn't going down without a fight. After Dr. Harrison's devastating assessment, I knew I was running out of time. Jessica had convinced a medical professional that I needed supervised care, and I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. But she had made one crucial mistake. She underestimated my determination to uncover the truth. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to gather concrete proof of Jessica's deception, no matter what it took. I started with technology that Jessica assumed I couldn't handle. My grandson had given me a smartphone for Christmas, and while Jessica often made comments about how confusing technology must be for someone my age, I had actually become quite proficient with it. I learned to use the voice recording app. The first breakthrough came during Jessica's next visit. She had come over to discuss my care options, as she put it. I had my phone recording in my pocket. "Dorothy," she said in her most caring voice, "Michael and I have been talking, and we think it's time to start looking at some residential facilities, just for a trial period, to see how you like having more support." I played along, asking questions about what kind of facility she had in mind. Well, there's a lovely place about an hour from here. It's more expensive, but Michael thinks you deserve the best care possible. The only concern is that it would mean selling your house to cover the costs. My blood ran cold. She was talking about taking my home, the house I had lived in for 35 years, the house that held all my memories with my late husband. But I kept my voice calm and continued the conversation. "Jessica," I said, "I'm curious about something. You mentioned to Dr. Harrison that I've been repeating stories and having trouble with appointments. Can you give me some specific examples?" She didn't hesitate. "Oh, Dorothy, there have been so many instances. Just last month, you told Michael and me about your trip to the grocery store 3 different times in one evening. And 2 weeks ago, you showed up for our dinner party a day early, remember? I had everything recorded, and I knew both examples were lies. I had never repeated any story about a grocery trip, and there had been no dinner party that I had mixed up dates about." But Jessica was just getting started. And there was that incident when you left the stove on all night. Thank goodness nothing happened, but it scared us so much. Another lie. I had never left the stove on. I was meticulous about kitchen safety. Over the next 2 weeks, I recorded every interaction with Jessica. I also started paying attention to her conversations with Michael when they thought I couldn't hear. The most damning evidence came during a dinner at their house. I had excused myself to use the bathroom, but returned quietly when I heard my name mentioned in their conversation. "I think we're moving too slowly," Jessica was saying to Michael. "Every week we wait is another week she could have an accident or do something dangerous. We need to be more aggressive about getting her into a facility." Michael sounded reluctant. "Mom seems fine when I talk to her. Maybe we're being too hasty." Jessica's voice became sharp, dropping the sweet tone she always used around me. "Michael, you're not seeing what I see because you're not with her as much as I am. Yesterday, she called me 3 times asking about the same doctor's appointment. She's getting worse and will be liable if something happens to her while she's living alone." I held my breath, recording every word. "Plus," Jessica continued, "have you looked at the numbers? Her house is worth almost $400,000. That money could fund her care for years, and honestly, it's not fair for such a valuable asset to just sit there when she's not really capable of maintaining it anymore." There it was. Jessica wasn't concerned about my well-being. She was concerned about my money and my assets. She saw my house, my life savings, as resources that were being wasted on my independence. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. "The truth is," Jessica said, "I've already started the preliminary paperwork for guardianship. My lawyer says that with Dr. Harrison's assessment, we have a strong case for having you declared her legal guardian. Once that's in place, we can make all the necessary decisions without having to convince her to cooperate." My legs nearly gave out. Guardianship meant that Jessica would have legal control over all my decisions, my finances, my living situation, everything. I would become legally incompetent, and she would have the power to do whatever she wanted with my life and my assets. Michael's voice showed he was surprised by this information. "You've already talked to a lawyer. Don't you think we should discuss this as a family first?" Jessica's response was chillingly manipulative. "Darling, sometimes we have to make hard decisions to protect the people we love. Your mother's pride is preventing her from accepting the help she needs. If we wait for her to agree, it might be too late. The lawyer says the process takes about 60 days, and then we can get her into proper care where she'll be safe and happy. I had heard enough. I quietly made my way back to the bathroom, then returned to the dinner table as if nothing had happened. For the rest of the evening, I played the role of the confused, declining woman that Jessica had created, all while my phone continued recording. That night, I didn't sleep. I spent hours organizing all my evidence, the recordings, my detailed journals, the documentation of Jessica's lies and manipulations. I had proof that she was systematically deceiving everyone about my mental state, and I had recorded her admitting that her real motivation was gaining control of my assets. But I knew that evidence alone wouldn't be enough. Jessica had already convinced Dr. Harrison and was working on convincing Michael. I needed allies, and I needed a strategy. The next morning, I made a decision that surprised even myself. I was going to fight back, and I was going to do it in a way that Jessica would never expect. I started making phone calls, first to my own lawyer, then to my longtime family doctor, and finally to a private investigator who specialized in elder abuse cases. It was time to show Jessica that she had picked the wrong target. This 70-year-old woman was about to prove that experience and determination could triumph over manipulation and greed. The battle for my freedom was about to begin, and I had the weapons I needed to win. Armed with hours of recorded conversations and months of documented evidence, I began building my defense. But I knew I had to be strategic. Jessica had spent almost 2 years creating her narrative about my decline, and I couldn't simply expect people to immediately believe me over her carefully constructed lies. My first call was to Dr. Patricia Coleman, the family physician I had been seeing for over 15 years. Unlike Dr. Harrison, who had only met me once, Dr. Coleman had a baseline understanding of my cognitive abilities and health status. "Dorothy," she said when I explained the situation, "I have to say I was surprised when I heard about Dr. Harrison's assessment. In all the years I've been treating you, I've never observed any signs of cognitive decline. Your medical records show consistently normal mental status evaluations." This was exactly what I needed to hear. Dr. Coleman agreed to conduct her own comprehensive cognitive assessment and to review Dr. Harrison's notes. When we met the following week, Dr. Coleman's evaluation was thorough and objective. She tested my memory, problem-solving abilities, attention span, and executive function. The results confirmed what I already knew. My cognitive abilities were completely normal for someone my age. More importantly, when Dr. Coleman reviewed Dr. Harrison's notes, she found several concerning discrepancies. To write a detailed report contradicting Dr. Harrison's assessment, and to serve as an expert witness if needed. Next, I contacted Robert Martinez, an attorney who specialized in elder law and financial abuse. When I played him the recordings of Jessica discussing guardianship and my assets, his reaction was immediate and strong. "Mrs. Dorothy," he said, "what you've documented here is a clear case of attempted financial exploitation and elder abuse. The fact that she's pursuing guardianship while explicitly discussing gaining control of your assets shows intent to defraud." Mr. Martinez explained that Jessica's plan was more sophisticated than I had realized. By having me declared incompetent, she would gain legal control not just over my daily decisions, but over my entire estate. She could sell my house, access my savings, and make financial decisions that would benefit her family while claiming it was for my care. But we had one major advantage. Jessica didn't know that I had evidence of her real motivations. Our strategy was multifaceted. First, we would file a restraining order to prevent Jessica from taking any legal action regarding guardianship. Second, we would present my evidence to the appropriate authorities to investigate her for attempted elder abuse. Third, we would arrange for Michael to hear Jessica's true intentions in a way that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. The last part was the most delicate. Despite everything, Michael was still my son, and I didn't want to destroy his marriage if there was any chance of salvaging the relationship. But I also couldn't allow Jessica to continue manipulating him. Mr. Martinez suggested arranging a family meeting where Jessica would be confronted with the evidence in Michael's presence. The goal was to give her an opportunity to confess and potentially seek help, while ensuring that Michael understood the full scope of her deception. We scheduled the meeting for the following Saturday, telling Jessica that we needed to discuss my care options. I invited them to my house, where Mr. Martinez would be present as my legal representation. Jessica arrived looking confident and prepared. She had brought a folder of documents about various assisted living facilities and seemed eager to move forward with her plans. "Dorothy," she said warmly, "I'm so glad you're finally ready to make some practical decisions about your future. Michael and I have found some wonderful places that would be perfect for you." That's when Mr. Martinez introduced himself. "Miss Jessica," he said formally, "we need to discuss some concerning information that has come to light regarding your interactions with Mrs. Dorothy and your stated intentions regarding her care and finances." Jessica's confident demeanor flickered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered. "I'm not sure what you're talking about. Everything I've done has been out of concern for Dorothy's well-being." Mr. Martinez then began playing the recordings. First, the conversation where Jessica admitted to lying about my repeated stories and confused appointments. Then, the discussion with Michael about guardianship and accessing my assets. As Jessica's own voice filled the room, detailing her plans to gain control of my house and finances, the color drained from her face. Michael sat in stunned silence, staring at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. When the recordings finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Jessica finally spoke, her voice shaking. "Those conversations are taken out of context. I was only trying to protect Dorothy and make sure she gets the care she needs." But Mr. Martinez was prepared for this response. He presented the timeline of Jessica's manipulations, the documentation of her lies to medical professionals, and the evidence that she had been systematically undermining my independence while positioning herself to benefit financially. Michael finally found his voice. "Jessica," he said quietly, "is this true? Have you been lying about my mother's condition?" Jessica tried to maintain her facade, but faced with overwhelming evidence, she began to crack. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under," she said, her voice becoming desperate. "Taking care of an aging parent is exhausting, and I was just trying to make sure everyone was protected." But Michael had heard enough. The recordings had made it clear that Jessica's concerns had nothing to do with my well-being and everything to do with financial gain. What happened next would determine whether my family could survive Jessica's betrayal or whether her greed had destroyed us beyond repair. The confrontation was far from over, and the most shocking revelations were still to come. The silence in my living room was deafening after Mr. Martinez finished presenting the evidence. Jessica sat frozen, her carefully constructed mask finally slipping away completely. Michael stared at his wife with a mixture of shock and disgust that broke my heart. But Jessica wasn't finished. Cornered and desperate, she made one last attempt to manipulate the situation. "You're all ganging up on me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Everything I did was out of love for this family. Dorothy, you have to understand, I was scared. Scared that something would happen to you. Scared that Michael would blame himself if you got hurt living alone." It was a masterful performance, full of emotion and apparent sincerity. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then she continued, and her true nature emerged once again. "And yes, I talked about your house and your finances, but only because care is expensive and we need to plan ahead. I never intended to take anything that wasn't being used for your benefit." Mr. Martinez leaned forward. "Miss Jessica, we have recordings of you discussing how your mother-in-law's assets were being wasted and how much money you could access through guardianship. Those are your words, not taken out of context." Jessica's facade cracked further. She turned to Michael with desperation in her eyes. "Michael, darling, you have to believe me. I love your mother. I would never hurt her." But Michael had been quietly processing everything he'd heard, and when he finally spoke, his voice was cold and controlled. "Jessica," he said, "you convinced me that my mother was losing her mind. You made me doubt her competence, her safety, her ability to live independently. You had me believing that I was being a bad son by not forcing her into a nursing home." His voice grew stronger as his anger built. "But it was all lies. You manipulated me, you manipulated medical professionals, and you were planning to have my mother declare incompetent so you could steal her life savings." Jessica tried to interrupt, but Michael held up his hand. "I heard you, Jessica. On those recordings, I heard you calculating the value of my mother's house. I heard you talking about guardianship like it was a business transaction. That wasn't love or concern. That was greed." What happened next was both heartbreaking and liberating. Jessica's mask fell away completely, and the person underneath was someone none of us recognized. "Fine," she shouted, her voice filled with venom. "You want the truth? Here's the truth. I'm tired of pretending to care about a selfish old woman who refuses to acknowledge that she's a burden on everyone around her." The room went silent again, but Jessica wasn't finished. "Do you have any idea what it's like being married to someone who puts his mother before his wife? Every decision we make has to consider Dorothy. Every vacation, every major purchase, every life choice gets filtered through what's best for precious mother." Her words were like acid, burning away any pretense of the caring daughter-in-law she had pretended to be. And yes, I wanted access to her money. She's sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars while we struggle with our mortgage and car payments. She's going to die eventually anyway, so why shouldn't that money be used to help the family now when we need it? Michael stood up, his face pale with shock. "Get out," he said quietly. "What?" "Get out," Michael shouted. "Get out of my mother's house, get out of my life, and don't ever come back." Jessica looked stunned, as if she couldn't believe her manipulation had finally failed. "Michael, you can't be serious. I'm your wife." "You're nothing to me," Michael replied. "Pack your things and leave our house. I'll file for divorce on Monday." After Jessica left, screaming threats and accusations, Michael and I sat alone in my living room. My son looked devastated, aged by the realization of what his wife had tried to do. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking, "I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you. I should have seen what she was doing." I reached over and took his hand. Michael, she was very skilled at manipulation. She fooled medical professionals, she fooled our friends, and she almost fooled me into doubting myself. The important thing is that we discovered the truth before it was too late. Over the following weeks, the legal consequences of Jessica's actions unfolded. Mr. Martinez filed charges for attempted elder abuse and financial exploitation. The recordings and documented evidence made the case straightforward, and Jessica eventually accepted a plea agreement that included restitution and probation. More importantly, Dr. Coleman's comprehensive evaluation completely contradicted Dr. Harrison's assessment. The state medical board investigated Dr. Harrison's evaluation methods and found significant deficiencies in his assessment protocols. Michael filed for divorce, and Jessica moved back to her home state. Before she left, she made one final attempt to contact me, leaving a voicemail that was equal parts apology and threat. "Dorothy," her voice said, "I want you to know that I never meant for things to go this far, but you've destroyed my marriage and my life. I hope you're happy living alone in that big house with all your precious independence." I deleted the message without listening to it twice. Jessica still didn't understand that independence wasn't about being alone or being stubborn. It was about having the right to make my own choices, to live with dignity, and to not have my worth measured by my assets. The most beautiful part of this whole ordeal was how it strengthened my relationship with Michael. The crisis had forced us to have honest conversations about aging, family responsibility, and what it really means to care for someone you love. "Mom," he said during one of our weekly dinners, which had resumed after Jessica left, "I realize now that I was so afraid of losing you that I was willing to give up your autonomy to keep you safe. That wasn't love, that was my own fear." We talked about realistic planning for my future, not the fictional decline that Jessica had created, but actual considerations about aging, health changes, and when I might genuinely need additional support. I also made changes to protect myself. I updated my will and estate planning documents to include safeguards against financial exploitation. I established a medical directive that specified my 14 preferred doctors and decision-making protocols. And I created a support network of friends, neighbors, and family members who could provide objective observations about my well-being. Most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts. When someone's actions don't match their words, when kindness feels manipulative, when help comes with strings attached, those feelings are worth investigating. Today, 3 years later, I'm still living independently in my home. I'm 73 now, and while I've made some adjustments for safety and convenience, my mind is as sharp as ever. I volunteer at the local literacy center, I maintain my garden, and I've even learned to use video calling to stay connected with family members across the country. Michael is dating someone new, a woman named Sarah, who treats me with genuine respect and kindness. The difference between Sarah's authentic warmth and Jessica's calculated manipulation is startling. Sarah asks my opinions because she values them, not because she's building a case about my mental capacity. But the most important lesson I learned is that predators like Jessica count on their victims being isolated and doubting themselves. She succeeded for as long as she did because I kept questioning my own perceptions instead of trusting my instincts. If you're an older adult and someone in your family is pushing too hard for major life changes, questioning your competence, or showing unusual interest in your finances, pay attention to those red flags. Document everything, seek second opinions, and don't be afraid to ask for help from professionals who don't have a conflict of interest. And if you're an adult child worried about an aging parent, remember that taking away someone's independence should be the last resort, not the first solution. Real love means supporting someone's autonomy for as long as safely possible, not removing it at the first sign of inconvenience. Jessica thought she could manipulate a lonely old woman into giving up everything she had worked for her entire life. She thought that age made me vulnerable and gullible. She was wrong. Age gave me wisdom, experience, and the determination to fight for what was mine. And when I had to choose between maintaining peace and protecting my freedom, I chose freedom every time. My name is Dorothy. I'm 73 years old, I live independently in my own home, and I make my own decisions about my life. Jessica tried to take that away from me, but she failed. Because some things are worth fighting for, no matter how old you are. Your dignity, your autonomy, and your right to live life on your own terms are among them. And if someone tries to convince you that you're too old, too confused, or too much of a burden to deserve those rights, remember my story. Remember that sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones you need to protect yourself from. Trust your instincts, document everything, and never stop fighting for your independence. Because the moment you give up that fight is the moment you lose everything that makes life worth living. And here's the thing, I've got stories that are even more shocking than Dorothy's. Like Margaret, who discovered her son-in-law was slowly poisoning her to speed up his inheritance. Or Helen, who caught her daughter-in-law selling her prescription medications. But YouTube only shows my videos to people if I have enough subscribers. Right now, I'm at 3 subscribers, and I need your help to reach 1,000 so these stories can reach the people who desperately need to hear them.